Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Tonight I'll be talking about writing cross-platform GUI applications with wxPerl and XRC. WX widgets used to be just called WX at one point. I can't remember. For some reason they had to change the name. But is a GUI toolkit that's written in C++ and it's available with different languages and things like that. Perl actually has quite a few different GUI toolkits, so I thought I'd just mention so you know what else is out there. Obviously Perl TK, I think pretty much everybody who's ever done anything with Perl probably knows about TK. TKX, which Bob was talking about at the last meeting, he couldn't get it installed, and I think I actually helped him get it installed, which that's now going through Tickle, I believe, instead of straight bindings through Perl, because according to him, I'm not entirely sure about this, but I guess Perl TK is not quite as well maintained as it used to be. Okay, and then you've got GTK and GTK2, which obviously help you if you're on Linux, not so much in other places. These two are cross-platform, so Windows. Do you know is TK work on Macs? You Mac guys? Okay, that I don't know either.
Yeah, TK works on Macs.
Okay, all right, cool. I wasn't sure about that. Prima, which is one that's, I think, pretty niche. I've not really heard much about that, so I don't know too much about that one. FLTK, which is Fast Light Toolkit, which is another one that's out there. Win32 GUI, which, again, only helps you on Windows. And then wxPerl, which are the Perl bindings for WX, and that's what we'll be covering tonight. It's been around for quite a while. The project started in 1992. The library itself is written in C++. So obviously a lot of the tutorials are geared towards that sort of thing, but I'll show you later there are some good places to get Perl-specific information. The thing that I liked about it is it uses the native widgets on whichever platform you're running on. So I don't know, I had done some TK stuff, I don't know, like 10 years ago on Windows, and it kind of sort of looked right, but I mean you could just look at it and tell that it wasn't quite right. You could tell it wasn't a native application. But you don't have that problem with WX widgets because it actually acts as a wrapper or a layer between your program and whatever operating system you're on. Cross-platform, Windows 95, 98, ME, NT, 2000, XP. I didn't see Windows 7 on there or Vista. Now that I think about that, I'll have to check and see whether or not it's works with those now. You've got Linux and Unix. Basically, what it does is it uses the GTK widgets. As you know, on Linux and Unix, you've got different, you've got like Motif and GTK and KDE and other things. This uses GTK is what it uses on the Linux and Unix. OS 10, it does work on OS 10 as well. And Windows Mobile, iPhone SDK, and embedded GTK. I think this support is relatively new, so I don't know how complete it is, but they at least claim to support it somewhat on their webpage. And like I mentioned, it's got different language bindings, Perl, Python, Ruby, and again, C++. Those are the big ones. There are others out there as well. Any questions so far? Okay. All right. Well, first, if you want to learn about it, a good place to start is the website. And I'll have to see how well that works. Not at all. Okay. I'll have to go off the full screen here so I can get my tabs. Okay, so basically they've got documentation, all the standard stuff you'd want to see. The documents, and I'll get into this a little later, the documentation is basically kind of unified docs. It's for the C++ version of the library, but what they do in the docs is if there's any language specific differences in a particular method or class or that sort of thing, it'll actually just make a note of that. So like for Python or Perl, whatever, it'll say, hey, you call this a little differently, or you call this with different parameters or more or fewer parameters, that sort of thing. Okay, then you've got the wxPerl specific page. They've got documentation, they've got example, they've got different articles that they link to. They've got a wiki here also. And hold on just a second. Sorry. Sorry, I think this is our new guy. Hello? Oh, yes, we do. I'll send somebody right down. Thanks. All right, bye. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, we've got our newcomer coming. All right. So it's got a wiki available as well, too. So there's quite a bit of information now, quite a bit more than when I first started with it several years ago. I don't necessarily consider myself an expert. I haven't written a ton of GUI programs, but I've dabbled in it off and on over the last probably 10 years or so. Okay. And like I said, I did mention the unified documentation. They've actually got it in several formats. They've got it in Windows compressed HTML help files. They've got it in HTML, PDF, so that all different kinds of ways you can get it. And wx Demo, which actually here, hang on, I will. Give VNC a second to load here. I'll just show you an example of the documentation just so you can get an idea. It's pretty thorough. And then I'll show you the wx Demo. wx Demo, while this is loading, I'll talk about that. Used to come as part of wxPerl, and it just gave you demos of how to do different things. I was really impressed this time when I came and used it, because they've actually split it off into a separate package on CPAN. So you download that and you just run it as a program. And I'll show you that in a second. Right now I'll just show you the documentation here. So you've got, basically, this is where I spend most of my time, the alphabetical list of classes, which is huge. Hey, come on in, just have a seat anywhere. And you can see, if I'm not in the way, that that's huge, that alphabetical list of classes. Let's see. Just as an example, here's an about dialog. And it just gives you all the different methods. If I knew of one in particular that had Perl notes, I'd go to that, but I don't happen to know one off the top of my head. This is the wx Demo. This is really nice compared to what it used to be. Basically, you've got by categories you can go through and find demos, specific widgets that you want to know, where are they used. It will list for each different widget type every different demo that shows up in. So then you can look at the code and see and compare different ways that it's used in different examples. And then you've got the events where you can see specifically where certain events are used. So I'll just show you a couple of them just so you can get an idea. Let's see, let's go under like a color dialog here. So you've got the source right here in the tab of the demo. And then in the demo tab, you actually run it. And as you can tell, anybody who's a Linux user, especially if you're a GNOME user, or GNOME, however it's pronounced, you'll recognize that this is the native color picker widget. So if I were running this on Windows, you would see the Windows one. Let's see. So, you know, progress, dialogue, all kinds of different things. I mean, this is just huge compared to what it used to be. It used to be like, you know, 10, 15 demos, and now I have no idea. There's like 50 of them in there or something. It's pretty nice.
The source it's giving you is the Perl source or the C++ source?
The Perl source. Yeah, this is actually part of, yeah. This actually used to come with wxPerl, and then I guess it got to be big enough they decided they wanted to split it out as a separate package. So you can install this right off of CPAN. And let's see. Oh, actually the controls one is calendar control. I mean, you've got pretty much all the different kinds of things you would expect. So we can sit there and click that, and it shows you how you can update a separate field with information from that widget. So anyway, any questions about any of that so far?
Is there a IDE that comes with it too?
I'll actually get to that. That's one of my slides here. So. All right, we've covered all that. Actually, it'll be in a slide or two. Okay, XRC, this is specifically what I wanted to talk about towards WX, because I haven't seen a ton of information about it. But what it is it's an XML specification for WX widgets, so it's also cross-platform as well, that allows you to specify the layout and resources of your GUI inside of XML instead of inside of code. So you don't have to declare all your different widgets inside the Perl code. You can declare all or most of them in the XML, and then you load that at runtime, and then use it that way. So you could literally, if all you wanted to do was redesign the layout of your GUI, you could do that and not touch your code at all. Just basically rearrange everything if you don't think that it works well from a user interface perspective. Just rearrange it, and your program should still work fine with it. It'll just reload it at runtime and go. So the types of things you can have in there: dialogues, menu bars, toolbars. And I said these are off the website, and entire GUIs, because the one I'll show you later that I did, that I've got pretty much everything specified in there. There's only a few handful of like error dialogues that I've actually got within my code.
Because they have to be, or because you just did it?
Just because I did. I'll have to admit I had to cut a few corners on this since I had to reschedule the meeting. I wasn't 100% done with this when I did that. So. For the C++ people, obviously this is a nice benefit because they don't have to recompile. You know, Perl, not so much, other than the example that I gave you if you wanted to just rearrange things. But the other nice thing is you get a nice separation of your layout and your code, which is nice because if you've ever done like a lot of TK stuff, that's what I always hated about doing it, is just because you've got pages and pages and pages of nothing but declaring what widgets you want and telling it how you want them laid out on a page, you know, that sort of thing. So you get away from a lot of that. So any questions about that so far? Okay, we may actually get out of here under an hour. We'll see. Okay, Brian, your question. Basically, there are more development tools out there than this. A lot of them are more geared towards C++, so since this isn't the C++ mongers, I left those out. In fact, mainly I geared this towards the ones that output XRC, since that's mostly what I'm talking about tonight. wxFormBuilder seems to be the most popular one right now. I used to use wxGlade, but lately it seems like FormBuilder is kind of the one that's got the consensus that most people use. I like both. Both of them are, you know, either one of them are good choices. Actually, I still use wxGlade some. The reason I like it is it does output Perl as well as XRC. So if you can't find a good example, like in the demo or online somewhere, you can code it up in the, you know, in the interface, tell it to generate Perl, and then you can look at how it did it. So I've done that a few times to get examples of how to use certain widgets. And XRC ED, this one is a little more primitive. I think actually it's funny, this is in reverse order of the ones that I used. Basically, I used this one several years ago, then this one, and then this one. So, and this is the first time I've used wxFormBuilder, was for this project, and but I liked it a lot. The cool thing is too, though, since XRC, you know, is standard, I was able to import. I had originally written this program years and years ago with wxGlade, and I just imported the XRC into FormBuilder and then created a project out of that. So, you know, that saved me some space, and then I just reworked it from there. But a lot of them are able to import XRC, so you can, you know, decide midstream you want to switch development tools. Okay. I'll go ahead and actually show you. I've got a screenshot of FormBuilder, but I'll actually show it to you in VNC as well. You know, a lot like what you would expect. This is basically, you know, the project. Top level frame is, you know, the main window itself, and then everything else is a child of that. One of the things that I like about FormBuilder is that it doesn't allow you to do illegal things as far as what you're laying out on top of what. And Glade, I know, used to, maybe they've fixed some of that, but where stuff would work but it wouldn't look right and you weren't sure what you did wrong, well, it's usually because you did something out of order. You needed a panel when you didn't put one in, or that sort of thing. So basically, you'll notice that each one of these, like the frames, the panels, those sorts of things, can have usually one child. And so if you want to put multiple widgets on, which most of the time you do, you'll put some sort of sizer underneath that. And it's got several different sizer types depending on the type of layout you want. So the box sizer basically gives you evenly spaced boxes, either vertically or horizontally. So like basically for this sizer here, I've got my main splitter, which is this splitter here, and then I've also got the other splitter here, or basically all of these things are contained under the box sizer there. So for the splitter window, I've got separate panels to put things on, and then again you put sizers on top of the panels again, because if you want to put multiple things in, they need to go in a sizer. That was one of the things that, because some of the other development tools didn't always enforce that, it took me a little while to pick up on that concept. But that's what I like about this, is it will not allow you to put something illegal inside of something else. So if it's not working, it's most likely because you need a sizer there of some sort. And the other sizer type that I use in this is the flex grid sizer, which basically gives you like a flexible table layout. But everything's not fixed size. So if you used a box sizer, there's also a fixed size grid that will basically expand the grid to the size of the largest widget that you've got in one of the cells. With the flex sizer, that's what I'm using down here. I didn't want to do that because I wanted this to be huge and I wanted this to be small, so I wanted it to be flexible like that when I laid it out. And anytime in a sizer that you just want empty space, it's just got things called spacers that you put in. You can't see the grid here, but like here and here I've got empty cells, so that's where the spacers are coming in, just to take up the space there. Obviously this is pretty much almost exactly what you'll see when you actually run your program. And then up here you've got all the different widgets, sizers, panels, windows, dialogues, all those different things. And then here where you set whatever object that you're working on, here's where you set the properties for those. And you've got, because there's a hierarchy of classes in WX widgets, pretty much everything inherits from WX Windows. So you'll have, it splits off. This part is specific to the widget type that you're working with. This stuff down here is the stuff that you'll see for pretty much every widget type that you see in it. So, also, well, obviously since it's in C++, you can output C++ with this. But you can also view the XRC as you go. So if you want to look at what it's about to generate, you can do that here. And then you just save, hit the gear to generate it. And at the project level, you specify like where you want it to save the project file and the output, the XRC output. So you just specify wherever that is, hit generate, boom, you've got an XML file.
This one doesn't generate the Perl though, right? Just the C++.
No, this one doesn't. The wxGlade does.
So can you import this project in there, or just the XRC?
Just the XRC. So you could import the XRC into wxGlade, right, and then you could switch and tell it to output Perl, and it would do that for you. I think it also outputs Python as well, too. I can't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure it does. Okay. Any more questions about this in particular? Okay. All right, well, let's go ahead and look at some XRC. This is actually the XRC that gets generated for my project. I'm not going to go through all of it. Most of you guys have seen XML before. But just point out, pretty much everything is an object. Those are your different, you'll see the class. So there's one of my panels. There's my splitter window, there's my frame, which is my top level frame. You'll see a lot of this sort of style thing. These are obviously, since they're being ORed, these are integer defines that basically you can import into your program, and you can also use an XRC that just specify different features or layouts or whatever of the particular widget that it's specified for. So anyway, one other thing I didn't point out, but you saw the little question marks in the other screen. Those are basically static bitmaps that I didn't define. So it's a bitmap object that doesn't actually have a bitmap associated with it. You'll see why in a second when I run the demo. I just wanted to point that out. But you'll see things like your style things like a sunken border. You can have raised borders, sunken borders, double borders, all kinds of different things you can do with it. All right. Okay, here is the code, but before I go into this too much, I'm going to go ahead and just run a quick demo of the program, and then we'll go through the code because it'll make a lot more sense that way. Let's see. And we'll see whether or not I've lost my VNC connection. I have to reconnect. Looks like I might have. You can talk amongst yourselves. No, actually this is my server at home. I didn't want to install any software on work computers, so that's why I'm doing it through VNC. So it's a little slow, but you'll get the idea. Come on. Anyways, you can talk amongst yourselves. Any other questions? I'll ask for that while we're waiting. Sorry for the VNC delays here. I wasn't sure how fast or slow this would be once I got here. Okay, good. Now, I'll go ahead and run this. Now, I'll give you the history of this program first, real quick, before I run it. I had written this for a client, like I said, years and years ago. This is a little nicer version that I reworked for the presentation, but the functionality is basically the same, where they just wanted to be able to resize images. That's it. These were non-technical people. I mean, sure, most of us will just fire up, GIMP or Photoshop or whatever to resize our images, or batch do it with, Image Magic or something like that. But again, non-technical people, and that's all they wanted, is they just wanted to resize images. That's it. So that's what I gave them. It's a very straightforward interface. There's not much to it. So I'll just show you a little the error checking here. If I try to preview, it says duh, load an image first. If I try to save, load an image first. And you notice these two things are disabled because there's nothing to do yet. I haven't loaded an image. So now we'll go ahead and do that. And you notice again, this is the native file dialog as soon as it refreshes. Okay, so we'll expand this a little bit. All right, so just random camel picture I got off the internet. And now we'll go through, if VNC is going to be cooperative. All right, and let's just give it a width of 100. You'll notice as I type, height is adjusting as well, so it's just calculating the scale. You could instead input a height and it'll do the same thing. It'll go back and calculate the width for you. All right, then now we go to preview. There you go. So now you see why I had those bitmaps in, basically they were in the GUI layout, but unspecified because I want to specify my runtime. So you just get a blank screen until you actually load something up, and then it loads the whichever file you picked into the bitmap. And what's cool is I'm actually using ImageMagick to do the scaling for me. So you can even do things like this and say, let's see, yeah, we'll say 1000. I can actually scale it up larger than it actually was originally. Hard to see on the small screen here, but you get the idea. So it basically ImageMagick will just do whatever you tell it to, and I'm just calculating these the same way, just proportional, that ImageMagick does, so it gives you the same output when you save it. And then I'm not going to bother actually saving it, but I'll show you the save dialog just so you can see. You know, here's just some other ones while I was testing that I went and saved at different sizes. So you can also specify down here different file types. Whoops, that went away. And it's not going to stay. But anyways, hopefully some of you caught it. Just like you would expect in a typical dialog, you can specify filters to filter out the different image types that you want to see in here. Okay, any questions so far? I mean, the program's pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Are we using ImageMagick? Is there using something with Perl to...
Yeah, I'm actually using, I think it's actually called Perl Magic, which does the, and at this point, unless somebody wants to see something else, I'll probably just close this VNC connection because I think I'm probably done with this. Anybody? Okay. We're good then. We'll just close that up and go back to the code. Okay. All right, I'm going to start at the bottom. I've structured a lot of this similar to the example code that I've seen. One thing that you'll probably see differently that I did in this particular program than in a lot of examples is they tend to just use the self object as a hash and just stuff the attributes in the hash. I actually, did have accessors and mutators and things like that for it. Just because I didn't like just stuffing things in there as a hash, but you'll see a lot of examples of that. But so basically, here's main. There's not much to main. It's just bootstrapping here. Basically, you are calling, you're saying, give me a new image resizer app, and then you go into a main loop. Because anybody who's done GUI programming before knows that's typically what you do is you go into some sort of loop that's just waiting for input, and then it takes the events and you do stuff with them. Any questions about that part so far? Okay. So here is image resizer app. The package for this, again, there's not much here. Basically, you've got on init, which is what gets called when everything initializes. And here, what I'm calling is wx top level frame. This is where the bulk of your code is going to show up, because the top level frame, again, is what they call that, the main window is the top, what they call the top level frame. And then I just set it to the top window, and then I show it. Just set show to 1, which displays it on the screen. All right, now we'll go back to the top. So you can see this is my package, wx top level frame, using wx events, and you can specify, just which different events you're actually using. I'm using a button event, file picker changed event, So I know when, that's the one off to the left where I loaded the file, so I know when that's changed. And then a text event I use in the two width and height fields so that I know when something is changed in those, so I know to go calculate what the other one should be.
So you just
Question?
List those all on the list, like if you have 70 events, then you just list them all there?
Yeah, I don't know how many of those you would have. Well, you know what, there's probably, like this everything, there's probably an all or an everything that you can load all of them in if you were in that sort of a situation. You'd probably just, okay. Thanks, Chris. All right, again, using ImageMagick and file temp, and we'll see why we're using that later. And then I'm inheriting from wxFrame, because that's, you remember seeing in the XRC file, that's what that class was for the top level window, is just called wxFrame. Okay, so new isn't that interesting, you know, it's just typical brief new. The most interesting thing is initialize, so we'll go down to that. Basically, I'm just going through and creating the mutators at runtime. There are a bunch of classes on CPAN that do this for you. You don't have to do it this way. This is just, I've gotten in a habit of doing it. It's kind of quick and dirty. Just loops through all of these and just creates mutators with these names. So I don't have to type them, because I don't like looking at all that code that, you know, basically does the same thing over and over again. All right, all image handlers here, this is what sets it up to work with all the different image types you might need to use. There are specific handlers if you just want to say, I just want PNGs or I just want JPEGs. You've got different handlers. In my case, since I wanted to be flexible, you know, I chose all of them. Okay, now this is where we get to the interesting part for the XRC. I create a new XML resource object, which that's the thing that's going to hold, load and hold my XRC. So you init all handlers, and then you load, and I give it the path, which is up here, to my XML file, my XRC file, and then it loads that up. Then from there, I tell it to load the frame, and I have to tell it which one, and that's, I just name it top level frame because that's what, you know, it seems like they call it in WX land is top level frame, so I wasn't very creative there. Okay, the next section, here's where we're setting up the different events. The cool thing about XRC, and I didn't do it with this program because I was trying to keep it simple, but I've done it in the past, is since it's in XML, you can do cool things by parsing the XRC file at runtime. You can do cool things like go out and say, what are all the buttons? And your program doesn't have to be aware of all the different buttons. You could you know, dynamically set up your events by parsing the XML file and seeing what kind of buttons you've got out there. And I've done that sort of thing. I've done with like field validation, and I didn't want to specify all the different fields that I've got, so I go out, parse the XML, grab all the text fields, and then run the different validations on it. So that's another reason why I like having it in XML, is because then you can pull cool little tricks like that at runtime, and you know, parse your own file to have your program figure out at runtime stuff about the GUI. So, all right, event button. These events are a little different from C++ and Perl. The main difference is you're passing in self, because it needs to, you know, have that to have access to all the rest of the parts of the GUI. This is a handy function call right here, get XRC ID, because that's the other parameter you need to get. But what this does is basically allows you to look it up by name in the XML file, and it returns the ID for you, so you don't have to worry about figuring any of that out. And then the last is the callback, that when I get a button event, I want to call preview. obviously in this case I've only got, oh hold on, no, actually I don't. Oh yeah, that's right. For this button, I've got this particular callback. So just wanted to make that clear. Here's the file picker change that I talked about. It again, it's not much different. Self, you need an ID, you need a callback. So most of the events are the same. This is where I calculate on width. When something changes with the text and width, I calculate height, vice versa down here. And then again, this is where I save. Any other questions? I'm going to breeze through the less interesting parts and try to stick to the more interesting parts. But if I breeze past something that you don't understand or want to talk about, let me know. Okay, now what I can also do is basically have it create the objects for me from the XML. And I do that by FindWindow. And then again, I just give it a name. And if you went and looked at my XRC file, you would see these names showing up in it. And that way, these are just convenient handles that I'm grabbing all the objects that I care about and I want to manipulate, all the different widgets, and just kind of storing them off so that I can use them later and I have convenient access to them. I could do the find windows wherever I needed them, but I just prefer to do it this way, grab everything I need up front and then just use it throughout the program later. So we'll skip that. That's the thing that creates the mutator. All right, but you'll see that because your GUI is in the XML, there's really not much to this code. It's actually a very simple program. This is where we select the image. We get self as we expect, and then we get the event when this is the callback that gets called. And then within the event, you can look up in the documentation what all, for different event types, what all methods you can call on that event. So on this one, I can get the path of the image that I selected, because obviously I need that. And then this is where I create the WX bitmap from that image. And then I just set a flag that tells me that I've loaded it. That's where all my error checking comes from. You know, when I was hitting the buttons earlier and I hadn't loaded anything, all of them just check that flag to see whether or not I've loaded anything yet. And then I go ahead and enable the height and width field, because now we've got something, a picture loaded up there. And that's it. That's all there is to loading the image. What's to say? A little bit of algebra here. Calculate height, calculate width. That's just cross multiply and divide, you know, just to keep the two images, the image that you're scaling, yeah, keep the aspect ratio for it. So not really too much to say about that, except that after I calculate it, I do a change value here, and then I pass it the calculated value. There's actually a, I can't remember if it's called set, but they give you two different methods, because one of those methods actually generates the same event that just get called, or just got called. So basically you'd end up in an endless loop because you're updating it and then it would generate the event. So that's why they provide you a separate one. This change value doesn't generate a text event, so you don't end up, you know, in an endless loop, which wouldn't be much fun. All right, I'm going to skip calculate width because it's just pretty much the mirror image. Preview. Either I'm just defaulting these to 0 just to get rid of warnings and stuff when it does calculations on those. And then here's the little bit of GUI code. Actually, I did also leave this in for a reason, just so you could compare and see the two. This is actual code that if you were setting up all of this, all of your GUI in the code, you'd see a lot of stuff like this, just setting up the different windows. This is just a message box, and again, you saw the error. This is where you specify what kind of button it's got on it, which is an OK button, which is just a constant, and then the error icon. You've got all the different icons, the question mark icon, the exclamation point icon, a whole bunch of different icons you can use for your pop-up windows. So again, I'm going to kind of breeze over this because really all of these are just my error checking, the little pop-up windows I showed you. They're all specified basically the same. So not very interesting. All right, I'll pause there for a second, see if anybody's got any questions. Everybody good with it so far?
My question next, so I'm not going to
Okay.
ask it right now.
All right, that's fine. If I don't answer it, then let me know. All right, well here is where I create my ImageMagick object, and then I read in the image. And this is just how, this is a warning code that if ImageMagick failed to load this for some reason, it would have a warning, and then I would pop up with an error of some sort. And then here's all the magic. My resize width, my resize height. You just specify that to ImageMagick, and it's the thing that actually does all the work of compressing or expanding the image for you. All right, here's where I said earlier that I talk about file temp. I'm just doing this because I need to write the file somewhere to load it into the left hand or the right hand pane. So that's all I'm doing is just writing it to a temporary file so that what file temp does is generates a unique temp file, so you don't have to worry about anything clobbering each other. And then, you know, again, just loading in the bitmap, and then I set another flag that says that it's been previewed. Because again, if you tried to mash on the save button and you haven't previewed yet, it won't let you do it.
So, so you have the wx bitmap that actually displays it, right?
Yeah.
And the set bitmap, what is that? Does that just reset the size of it, or what?
No, what it does is it says actually display this bitmap. So you've got a bitmap object that's in your GUI hierarchy,
right,
but so far it's empty, it's blank. So I'm telling it display this bitmap where you've got that bitmap object.
The other one's just the memory or whatever associated with it? Then?
Yeah, it's basically it's just allocating space to put a bitmap, but I don't have one in there yet. And set bitmap is the thing that actually puts it in there. Yep.
To the screen.
Yep. Okay. And then the last part, again, we'll skip the error dialogues, although I will show you the file dialog here, just so you can see a little different take. The first one that loads the image, I did in XRC. This one I deliberately did in Perl, just so you could compare and contrast. Because again, this is not even a real program that I use. I just mostly brought it back from the dead for this presentation. So I figured, what the heck, I'll do some of it in XRC, some of it in the Perl, so you can kind of see what the kind of stuff you're avoiding by having most of it in XRC. And this is where you specify, you know, your file types. You tell it that this is a save dialog and that you want it to prompt if you're trying to overwrite a file, because otherwise it'll just clobber it without saying anything to you. And then we get the path from the save dialog, which is saying the path and the file name of where you want it to save. And then I go for my resized bitmap, convert it to an image from a bitmap, a memory bitmap, and then save to file. And it does all the work for me. And then I just destroy the dialog once I'm done, because I don't need it anymore. And there you go. That's pretty much it.
Cool. So this isn't possible to do though in XRC like this, right? Because logic, a piece of it that you've got down there.
Well, I could do this part of it, not this stuff down here.
Stuff, right?
But yeah, actually, the first dialog that loads, all of that is in XRC. Yeah.
But you can only specify. Declaratively in XRC, right?
Yes, basically it will create the object for you. Right. So it takes it from XRC, and then when it loads it, it creates all the objects for you. And then you remember where I said I was doing all those find windows?
Right.
Those were going out and grabbing, those objects so that I could use them later. And that's basically how you can do logic on them, is because then you just run the methods on that widget's object,
Right.
and it does whatever you need to do.
In your program to do that, though.
Yes.
Not in XRC.
Not in the XRC. No, the XRC is just, like you said, declarative. It just basically says, these are my objects. These are how they're positioned and laid out against each other.
Okay.
That sort of thing. Cool. So, all right. Any other questions? I actually ended up almost on time, 5 minutes early. So,
cool.
All right.
How about deploying it? What do they have to have on that?
Oh, good question. Actually, yes. I actually kind of sort of wanted to do that, but decided it was too much for one talk. Actually, I did deploy this using a module called PAR on CPAN, which basically what it does is it kind of sort of cheats. It doesn't actually compile the Perl to an executable. What it does is it creates an executable zip archive, basically. And what PAR does is it figures out, well, sometimes you have to help it, but it tries to figure out as much as possible all the different libraries that you need for your program to run. So like if you're on Windows, like the Perl DLL, it would say, oh, well, yeah, obviously I'm running Perl. I need the Perl DLL. And then it would pull in any other compiled excess objects, like shared objects, or if they're just Perl files, modules, it'll pull all of those in to that zip archive. And then it's an executable archive that, for instance, I'm assuming it runs basically the same on Linux, but actually I've only used it under Windows because, again, non-technical people, I was obviously making this for a Windows-using person. So the first time they double-click on that executable, what it does is it unzips it to a temporary location with a hash so that every run thereafter, basically the first run will be a little slow because it's uncompressing everything and getting it all into place and getting the structure correct. Next time you run it, it goes straight in and actually runs the Perl stuff. Creates a little exe that bootstraps everything else and then runs it all there. So that's basically the very, very, very short version of PAR. And I did use that successfully, even at my last job, to distribute GUIs. And I even, I used install or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a free installer generator. So I actually, had an installer that would run. It would create the desktop icons and all the junk you needed and create the exe that you use. So they would use it just like any other Windows program, and they had no idea that it was Perl, under the hood. So it can be done. Again, on Linux, most of the time, well, you've got Perl there, so I guess it depends on how many modules you're using and, whether or not, if they're non-standard modules, then you may want to distribute something like that. But actually, I'm glad you asked that question because that does really tie in really well to doing GUI stuff. And I did want to do that, and maybe I'll do that as a totally separate talk sometime, talk about PAR. So.
That'd be good because you can do the different distributions on the different OSs and stuff.
Yeah.
Just have a bunch of them set up to do that.
So.
Cool.
Anyway, and I may not have gotten all the details exactly right because it's been a few years since I've used it, and I don't know, maybe they've even changed the way it worked, but that's roughly how it used to work. So, anything else? Okay. I guess we're good.
If you have to cancel a long-running operation, is there any kind of multi-threading in that main loop?
That's a good question. I haven't done anything complicated enough to need to use that, but I do know that WX Widgets itself is multi-threaded. How that translates into Perl, I don't know that for sure, because I've never actually needed to do that. That is a good question. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to it.
You can run WX in a threaded Perl, but you're going to have to compile a threaded Perl.
Yeah.
Padre, which is really the biggest WX app out there,
Yeah.
uses that extensively.
Okay.
So it does work,
So
it's stable, but you got to make sure you have a threaded Perl.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. All right.